is season 4 for The Witcher. Not looking good so far when it comes to the reviews. When it comes to the critics, right now they're at 55%. But when it comes to the fans, 19% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now,
I'm the most annoying guy on set because I'm saying, excuse me, you do realize that this should be happening and they wouldn't do that, and you haven't read this, that means this would be impossible. And everyone's just going, Henry, just shut up and do the thing. And I'm like, I don't want to do the thing because he wouldn't do it this way, and he can do it.
And that's where you start to get more uncomfortable and you're thinking, there's not a performance.
You knew that they knew when they, didn't promote this thing until a month before it came out. You knew they knew that switching from like Henry Cavill to Liam Hemsworth, as downhill as the franchise has gone.
It was posted last night. Netflix's Q2 report came out, and apparently they lost 1 million subscribers in the second quarter of this year, which we already saw that at the beginning of the year, they lost 200,000. The next month, they lost another couple 100,000, and they had projected that they were going to lose a couple million over the next few months. I don't really think people believed it, but it happened.
Millions of people are canceling their Netflix subscriptions. Why Netflix stock is absolutely tanking right now. I mean, it is just collapsing totally in the red. And you can see that it is on a massive downward slope this month. It's cratering. Why is that happening?
And you have a sense that you're going, is this really necessary?
Episode 1 spends the first like 10 to 20 minutes of the show trying to make you forget about Henry Cavill. They do everything they can to retcon it. I was shocked. They show Henry Cavill in multiple scenes, like when they're recapping, and they won't show his face. And then they reshot sequences that had Henry Cavill in it with Liam Hemsworth so they could like completely erase him from everything.
It started with a single sentence, a small line during an interview that nobody expected to go viral. Henry Cavill was promoting his new sci-fi thriller, smiling calm, the same composed energy fans had loved ever since he first picked up a silver sword as Geralt of Rivia. The host casually asked him about The Witcher, about how he felt seeing the new season arrive without him. Cavill paused, leaned back slightly, and with that trademark half-smile said, "Some stories lose their magic when they forget their roots." That was it. No names, no shade. Just a calm statement that felt loaded with meaning.
We knew that season 4 was going to be a disaster. We knew why Henry Cavill left. We knew because they had desecrated the lore and like everything that people love from the books, from the games. That's not what this TV show is about. In fact, it's about the activist showrunners and the activists at Netflix doing what they want with the character, regardless of whether that's in line with what everyone else loves.
Within hours, the clip exploded online. Twitter threads, TikTok edits, Reddit debates. Everywhere you looked, people were dissecting every syllable of that sentence. Fans called it the most polite middle finger in Hollywood history. Others said it was the moment The Witcher finally lost its last piece of soul. The video hit 20 million views in 24 hours. Side-by-side edits appeared, showing Cavill's gritty, battle-worn Geralt next to Liam Hemsworth's newly released scenes from The Witcher, Season 4. The difference was painful. One felt like a legend brought to life, the other like a fan trying to imitate one.
Were you familiar with this, the Watcher, before you, The Witcher?
The Witcher,
before you started?
I hadn't seen the TV show, and I hadn't read the...
Comments flooded in. From legend to disappointment. He warned them. They didn't listen. This is what happens when the fans care more than the writers. And just like that, the internet turned a quiet interview moment into a cultural reckoning. Cavill didn't have to complain or call anyone out. He simply reminded everyone what The Witcher was supposed to be, and how far Netflix had drifted from that vision.
What the f is this piece of shit?
But that one sentence was only the spark. What followed was a storm that the studio never saw coming. Because when Season 4 dropped, fans didn't just criticize it, they destroyed it. To understand the chaos of today, we need to go back to where it all started, the moment Henry Cavill walked away. When Cavill first joined The Witcher, it wasn't just another role for him. He was a genuine fan of the books and the games long before Netflix ever called. He'd spent hundreds of hours playing The Witcher 3, memorizing dialogue, and even correcting lore details on set. For him, Geralt wasn't just a character, it was a responsibility. But somewhere along the line, that passion started to clash with with the people writing the story. Reports began circulating that several writers didn't respect the original source material, that they even roasted it behind the scenes. Fans brushed off those rumors at first, but Cavill's eventual exit made them all sound a lot more real. When he announced he was leaving after season 3, the internet broke. Hashtags like #respect Henry Cavill and #bringbackGeralt trended for days. People weren't just sad, they were angry. They'd watched Cavill fight to keep the story faithful, only for him to be replaced by someone who didn't share that same history with the character. Liam Hemsworth was announced as the new Geralt, and instantly the skepticism began. It wasn't about talent. Hemsworth is a capable actor, but to fans, Geralt wasn't a costume you could swap out like a prop. Cavill had embodied the soul of the story. He looked, moved, and spoke like Geralt stepped straight out of Andrzej Sapkowski's imagination. And now, that authenticity was gone. For months, social media simmered with quiet frustration. People shared memes like Netflix's biggest downgrade, but many held on to a small hope. Maybe the writers had learned. Maybe season 4 would surprise everyone. Then came October 30th, 2025. Netflix dropped The Witcher season 4, and within hours, it became clear this wasn't the comeback fans were hoping for. The show opened to mixed reviews, and by the second day, the Rotten Tomatoes audience score had fallen below 40%. Comments called it soulless, rushed, and tone-deaf. Critics pointed out pacing issues, awkward dialogue, and a loss of emotional depth. But the harshest criticism wasn't about writing, it was about connection. Viewers said they couldn't feel the same weight in Geralt's character anymore. They described the performance as technically fine, but emotionally hollow. One viral comment summed it up perfectly. It's like watching someone cosplay your favorite hero without understanding why he mattered. Clips comparing Cavill's Geralt to Hemsworth's flooded TikTok. One edit showing Cavill delivering the famous "evil is evil" line beside Hemsworth's new battle monologue hit 10 million views overnight with the caption, "From conviction to confusion." And through all of this, Henry Cavill said nothing. He didn't post, didn't tweet, didn't even like a fan comment. Silence. And that silence spoke volumes. Because while fans were tearing the new season apart, they were also rewriting Cavill's legacy in real time. The internet began painting him not as a former actor of the series, but as its guardian, the man who tried to protect The Witcher from itself, the man who saw this collapse coming. And the thing about that kind of silence, it's loud, it echoes. By the second day of release, Netflix executives must have known they had a problem. Viewership metrics leaked online showing a steep drop between the first and second episodes, a clear sign that audiences were bailing early. But the outrage wasn't random, it was personal. Fans felt like they'd been ignored, like the people in charge didn't just misunderstand the story, they disrespected the ones who kept it alive. Henry Cavill's exit had always felt suspiciously principled. Now, it felt prophetic. Some stories lose their magic when they forget their roots. Those words kept circulating, attached to every meme, every review, every video essay tearing into season 4. The sentence became the perfect summary of what went wrong. And the more people repeated it, the more it started sounding like something else. Not just a comment, but a quiet confrontation. The storm really began the moment fans hit play. Season 4 opens with a reimagined version of Geralt's first appearance. Same tone, same setup, but something feels off. The fight choreography is polished, the sets look expensive, yet the heart isn't there. Within hours of the global premiere, social media went nuclear. The hashtag #NotMyGeralt shot to the top of trending lists in multiple countries. Viewers posted clips side by side with Cavill's old scenes, pointing out every difference, the stance, the delivery, even the look in the eyes. It wasn't hate, it was heartbreak disguised as outrage. Rotten Tomatoes numbers plummeted. Audience score dropped faster than any previous Netflix fantasy series. Critics weren't kind either. Major entertainment outlets wrote headlines like, "The Witcher 4 forgets what made it special. Netflix's fantasy risk backfires. Geralt returns, but his soul doesn't." On YouTube, content creators unleashed a flood of reviews within the first 48 hours. Titles like "Why The Witcher 4 Feels Soulless Without Cavill" and "Liam Hemsworth Tried But" dominated the trending tab. One reviewer summed it up savagely. "It's not Liam's fault. He just stepped into a battlefield that Netflix already burned. Everywhere you looked, people echoed the same sentiment. They should have listened to Henry, because fans hadn't forgotten the rumors from 2022 and 2023, the stories that certain writers roasted the original novels and called fans bad purists. At the time, Cavill never confirmed or denied anything, but his interviews hinted at friction. He'd said things like, "It's important to honor the author's vision. As long as the writers stay true to the lore, I'll stay loyal to the role." Now, those quotes felt prophetic. Every bad review, every meme, every angry tweet seemed to prove he'd been right all along. By the third day, Netflix's PR team was in damage control mode. Their social media accounts limited replies. The official Witcher subreddit had to lock multiple threads because discussions were spiraling into chaos. But the more the platform tried to control the narrative, the louder the backlash grew. Fans began creating their own campaigns, posting fan edits of Cavill's scenes with captions like "The Real White Wolf." Others launched petitions demanding his return or a reboot that respected the lore. Within days, one petition passed 500,000 signatures. And in the middle of this storm, that single interview clip resurfaced again and again. Cavill's calm expression, that knowing smile, and the quote, "Some stories lose their magic when they forget their roots." To fans, it wasn't a coincidence anymore. It was confirmation. They believed Cavill had finally said what he couldn't say say before, that he'd tried to warn Netflix, that he'd fought for the story, and when nobody listened, he walked away. Meanwhile, Liam Hemsworth faced an impossible situation. Even fans who admitted he wasn't bad couldn't separate him from the controversy. Every compliment was drowned out by nostalgia for Cavill's version. Viewers said the chemistry between characters felt flat, the tone uneven, the energy forced. The show's numbers reflected that disappointment. Within 3 days, The Witcher 4 saw a 37% drop in global viewership compared to Season 3's opening weekend, a staggering decline for a franchise once touted as Netflix's flagship fantasy. By now, the backlash wasn't just about a TV show. It had become a movement, one built around the idea that Hollywood keeps forgetting why people fall in love with stories in the first place. And as the outrage spread, the internet turned its focus toward the real villains of the saga, the people who wrote the story that Henry Cavill once fought to protect. The outrage didn't fade overnight, it grew teeth. Every hour brought another wave of fan reactions, another YouTube essay, another meme reminding Netflix what they'd lost. But this time, it wasn't just viewers venting. Even longtime critics who had defended the show before began to switch sides. Early reviewers started posting follow-ups, admitting they'd been too kind in their first impressions. One viral tweet read, "It's not just the recast. The writing feels like it's embarrassed by itself." That line hit a nerve because it echoed something Cavill had hinted at years ago, his quiet concern that the Witcher writers didn't truly believe in the world they were adapting. Old interviews resurfaced. Clips of him saying things like, "I'm here to represent the fans and the lore," now sounded almost like warnings sent back from a sinking ship. The internet began piecing together a timeline. When the tone shifted, when the lore got lighter, when Cavill started looking tired during press tours. And it all led to one conclusion. The rot had started long before Liam Hemsworth put on the wig. By day 3, media outlets were publishing think pieces with headlines such as "Henry Cavill was right all along." One columnist wrote that the new season looked expensive but felt hollow, comparing it to a castle built on sand. Fans ran with that metaphor, posting photos of crumbling castles labeled Netflix's Witcher. The backlash became self-fueling. TikTok edits merged Cavill's quote with slow-motion clips of Season 4 scenes, dramatic music swelling underneath. They weren't simple complaints, they were elegies, digital tributes to a show people had once believed in. Meanwhile, Netflix's silence only poured gasoline on the fire. No acknowledgement, no defense, not even a hint of humility. When one of the show's social media managers replied to a fan with a bland, "We appreciate all feedback," the comment section exploded with laughing emojis and screenshots of Cavill's quote. That's when audiences stopped treating it like a casting controversy and started treating it like a betrayal. Viewers weren't just disappointed, they felt deceived. They'd invested years into a story about honor, loyalty, and staying true to one's code, only to watch the creators ignore those same values behind the scenes. And if fans suspected the writers never loved the source material, the next discovery would confirm every fear they had. The tipping point came when old interviews and leaked posts began circling again, content that painted an unflattering picture of the team behind the scenes. It started with a resurfaced podcast clip from years earlier. A writer joked that adapting fantasy novels meant translating nerd language into something normal people can watch. At the time, no one paid much attention. Now, that quote looked like a confession. Within hours, Reddit threads blew up. Fans compiled every instance where showrunners had contradicted book lore, changed character arcs, removed crucial dialogue, or twisted backstories for modernization. A post titled "Proof They Never Respected Sapkowski" hit the front page with tens of thousands of upvotes. YouTubers jumped on it. Influencers who had once promoted the show began dissecting each deviation from the books, side by side with Cavill's passionate interviews. The narrative wrote itself. Henry fought for faithfulness. The writers fought for ego. And it wasn't just speculation anymore. Anonymous crew members began posting cryptic messages hinting that the tension between Cavill and the writers had been real and constant. One message read, "He was frustrated. They laughed at his notes. He stopped showing up to creative meetings because it was pointless, no official confirmation, but the internet didn't need one. The puzzle pieces already fit. Mainstream outlets caught on. Entertainment blogs, gossip pages, even respected trade magazines began running headlines. Inside the creative war that drove Cavill out of The Witcher, Netflix ignored the fans and paid the price. The story evolved from a show controversy into a cultural conversation about Hollywood arrogance, how studios chase algorithms instead of authenticity. Cavill became the symbol of creative integrity, the actor who walked away rather than watch a world he loved get twisted. And that's when the rumors about a direct confrontation surfaced. A supposed insider claimed that before leaving, Cavill met privately with the show's producers and told them bluntly, "If you don't honor the source, the fans will walk, and once they do, you'll never get them back." Nobody could prove the meeting happened, but the timing was perfect. It gave the internet exactly what it wanted, a heroic moment to crystallize everything wrong with the show. Netflix refused to comment, which only made it sound more believable. The silence from both sides turned rumor into legend. By now, the backlash had outgrown the series itself. Cavill's single interview quote had become the moral thesis of the whole disaster. Some stories lose their magic when they forget their roots, and the people who had roasted those roots were now watching the magic collapse in real time. As memes turned into manifestos and petitions hit new milestones, fans began asking a sharper sharper question. If Cavill saw this coming, what else did he try to say before he left? The internet was ready to dig even deeper, because if there really had been a confrontation, they wanted to know exactly what happened behind that closed door, and who walked out victorious. The world was on fire, and Henry Cavill said nothing. No statement, no post, no clarification. Just that single quote echoing everywhere like a prophecy that had finally come true. But silence has a strange power, especially when everyone is waiting for you to speak. A few days after The Witcher 4's release, Cavill appeared at a London press event for his new movie. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted his name, and among all the noise, one question cut through. "Henry, have you seen the new season yet?" He smiled politely. "I've been busy," he said, "but I've heard the fans are as passionate as ever." That one sentence was enough to send the internet into meltdown again. Because if you listened closely, it wasn't an answer. It was a dismissal, a masterclass in saying everything without saying a word. Clips from that moment hit TikTok within minutes. The comment sections flooded with the same phrase, "He knows." Fans started calling him the gentleman assassin, too classy to throw shade, too honest to fake approval. And as the outrage around The Witcher 4 grew, people began to reinterpret everything Cavill had ever said about the show in a new light. Old interviews suddenly felt loaded with hidden meaning. When he once said, "I'll always fight for the soul of the story," fans now saw it as a direct warning to the writers. When he said, "The books will always be the heart of The Witcher," it read like a quiet farewell to something he knew was already slipping away. In a way, Cavill didn't need to confront anyone publicly. The fans were doing it for him. Twitter threads became essays. YouTube comment sections turned into battlefields of nostalgia and fury. People weren't just defending an actor, they were defending a principle. Because deep down, everyone knew what was really happening. This wasn't about a TV show anymore, so it was about the clash between passion and control, between the person who loved the story and the machine that tried to own it. And the more Cavill stayed silent, the louder that contrast became. Fan edits flooded in daily. Some compared him to a knight walking away from a corrupted kingdom, others to a craftsman leaving his masterpiece before someone else repainted over it. The narrative had shifted completely. Henry Cavill wasn't a former actor. He was the Witcher that Netflix betrayed. But while fans were celebrating his quiet defiance, whispers began circulating again. Someone online claimed Cavill hadn't always been this silent, that before walking away, he'd made his feelings known, not through interviews, but in a closed-door conversation that would later be described as tense enough to end a franchise. It was a claim without proof, but it spread like wildfire. Because if true, it would explain everything: the abrupt exit, the sudden casting change, and the cryptic tone of his interview months later. And that's where the story turns from disappointment to confrontation. No one knows exactly what was said, but according to multiple anonymous posts from alleged crew members, the final meeting between Henry Cavill and the Witcher showrunners wasn't friendly. One insider described it as a philosophical argument disguised as a production meeting. Another said Cavill showed up calm, but you could feel the frustration behind his eyes. The room reportedly went quiet when he began speaking. He thanked everyone for their work, but then said something that made everyone shift in their chairs. "This story doesn't belong to us," he supposedly said. "It belongs to the fans, to the readers, to the people who believed in it before Netflix did." Silence. A producer tried to respond, saying they had to make the story accessible to modern audiences. Cavill allegedly smiled and replied, "The story was already accessible. That's why people loved it." If the rumors are true, the exchange lasted less than 10 minutes. Cavill stood up, shook hands, and walked out. No yelling, no drama, just quiet finality. The kind that makes everyone in the room realize something sacred has been broken. Hours later, his team released the official statement announcing his departure, thanking Netflix for the opportunity and wishing Liam Hemsworth luck. But between the lines, fans could sense it. This wasn't a creative decision. It was a resignation. And that's why when The Witcher 4 collapsed under the weight of backlash, people didn't see it as bad luck. They saw it as karma. The confrontation, whether real or myth, became the story's emotional truth. Memes flooded in showing Cavill walking away from a burning castle labeled Netflix. Fans began quoting that rumored line, "The story doesn't belong to us." It spread like a rallying cry across social media, a phrase that perfectly captured why so many viewers had turned against the show. Even critics who had dismissed the drama before started acknowledging the shift. A few entertainment journalists began referring to Cavill's exit as Hollywood's wake-up call. The message was simple. When you alienate the people who care most, both inside and outside the project, you destroy the very thing that made it valuable. Meanwhile, Liam Hemsworth faced an impossible task. Even if he delivered the performance of his life, the damage was done. Fans weren't judging him. They were mourning what he replaced. And Cavill? He moved on, focused on new projects, carried himself with the same composed confidence as always. But every time someone asked about The Witcher, that half-smile returned, and he'd changed the subject, which only made people believe the rumors even more. Because whether or not the confrontation actually happened didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that it felt true, and sometimes that's more powerful than proof. Some stories lose their magic when they forget their roots. That wasn't just a line anymore. It had become a lesson, one that every studio in Hollywood was now watching closely. By the end of the first week, the story had shifted again, and this time, it wasn't just Netflix under fire. It was Liam Hemsworth. To be fair, nobody envied his position. He stepped into a role already immortalized by someone who had lived and breathed it. Fans weren't waiting to see his Geralt, they were waiting to prove he wasn't Henry. And from the very first episode, that's exactly exactly how it played out. Clips of Liam's debut scene spread across social media. The lighting was beautiful, the production value clear, but the comment sections told a different story. He's trying too hard. He looks lost. Why does this feel like a parody? People weren't just critiquing the performance. They were mourning the energy that had vanished from the screen. Cavill's Geralt had carried this quiet fury, the sense of a man haunted by purpose. Hemsworth's version, despite the effort, just didn't capture that same gravity. Even professional critics started noticing. Reviewers described his take as earnest but weightless. One headline said it best: Liam Hemsworth isn't bad, he's just not necessary. And that's what hurt the most, because no matter how much he trained, how many hours he spent mastering Geralt's accent or swordsmanship, the fans had already decided this wasn't their Witcher. Every clip Cavill had ever filmed was now being reposted like sacred footage. Fans added melancholic music, quotes from the books, and that infamous line, "Some stories lose their magic when they forget their roots." The result? Millions of views, thousands of comments saying the same thing: bring him back. Petitions crossed 700,000 signatures. Fan campaigns began calling for a reboot or even a spin-off just to restore Cavill's legacy. Meanwhile, Netflix kept posting promotional clips trying to steer the conversation toward the new storyline, and every post was immediately flooded with replies roasting the studio. By the 10th day, The Witcher 4 had lost almost half of its opening week audience. What was meant to be Netflix's next big comeback had turned into one of its most publicly ridiculed launches in years. The algorithm couldn't save it. The PR couldn't spin it. The fans had already written the ending themselves. And at the center of it all was Henry Cavill, silent, dignified, unbothered. While others defended themselves on social media, he simply went on with his new career moves. A Warhammer project, a new franchise, a few magazine covers that subtly reminded everyone he'd moved on from The Witcher long before Netflix moved on from him. Still, for many fans, this wasn't closure. It felt like watching the hero walk away while the kingdom burned behind him. The show might continue, but The Witcher as they knew it had ended the day Cavill left. And for Netflix, that realization came too late. As the dust settled, the numbers told the story the headlines already knew. Streaming data leaked showing a massive viewership drop after the first 3 episodes. Fan engagement plummeted. Merch sales stalled. Even longtime influencers stopped covering The Witcher, calling it a brand without a heartbeat. Netflix quietly disabled comments on several marketing posts. Their executives stopped mentioning The Witcher during investor calls. It was as if the company wanted to erase the embarrassment, pretend it hadn't just watched one of its biggest franchises collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. But the fans didn't forget. They turned The Witcher's downfall into a parable, a story about what happens when corporate ego tries to overwrite creative passion. The meme posts became something deeper, a cultural critique of how Hollywood often underestimates its own audiences. People weren't just laughing anymore, they were reflecting, because everyone could sense it. This wasn't just about Geralt or Henry Cavill. It was about every franchise that had lost its way chasing algorithms instead of authenticity. Cavill, intentionally or not, became the face of artistic integrity. Every time he appeared in a new interview, people would quote that single line like it was scripture. Some stories lose their magic when they forget their roots, and that line had grown beyond The Witcher. It was now used to describe everything, from failed movie reboots to studio controversies. Cavill's quiet warning had become a cultural mantra. Even some of the original writers started going silent online. A few deleted their old posts roasting the books. One former staff member hinted in a now-deleted tweet that maybe we should have listened more. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Meanwhile, fan forums filled with theories. Some believed Netflix might try to bring Cavill back for a future season or a film reboot. Others said it was too late. The bridge had burned, and what remained was only ashes and regret. But no matter how you look at it, The Witcher's story had already found its ending. The show might continue, but the myth of Henry Cavill's Geralt, the warrior who fought not monsters but mediocrity, had already achieved something greater: immortality. Because in the end, The Witcher 4 didn't just lose viewers, it lost trust. And once that magic is gone, no amount of CGI or marketing can bring it back. Cavill didn't have to say a word. His silence said enough. The fans said the rest. As the months pass and new shows come and go, one truth remains carved into the legacy of Netflix's most infamous recast. You can replace the actor, you can rewrite the dialogue, but you can't fake passion, and you can't rebuild a story once it forgets its soul. So maybe Henry Cavill's final line to The Witcher wasn't spoken on screen. Maybe it was that quiet smile, that knowing look in the interview when he said, "Some stories lose their magic when they forget their roots." And maybe, just maybe, that was his way of saying goodbye.